The game is on. The wheels are in motion, and we aren't supposed to talk about it. We're not supposed to talk about Georgia, where GOP ballot observers were told to go, or in Michigan, where it turns out the city, or in Arizona, where ballots cast for Trump. See, we're not allowed to bring any of this up. We're supposed to follow along like a bunch of dumb sheep, even though this whole thing stinks worse than a Seattle fish market, and anyone with 2 eyes and a brain stem can see it. But no, any legitimate questions over late-night vote counting, post-dated mail-in ballots, or how Joe Biden can magically be pulling out 100% of the votes tallied at 3 a.m. behind closed doors, we're not allowed to talk about that. Why? Well, because Twitter, CNN, and the party of free and fair elections say so. And God knows they always tell the truth. So you know what? Screw them. We're going to talk about it. So Lord only knows how long this video will even be allowed to run on social media, because apparently we're not allowed to ask any of these questions. No matter how shifty things look as the votes continue to be tallied now, what, 48 hours after Election Day? We're not supposed to talk about how in Michigan, GOP attorneys were literally removed from the building where votes were being counted in Detroit, and where the windows to the absentee ballot counting room were covered up with poster board so that no one could see what was happening inside. We're not supposed to talk about how in Georgia, GOP party officials said their ballot counting observers in Fulton County were told to go home because counting had concluded for the night and that they'd pick up where they left off in the morning. After the observers left, they said the county kept tallying the votes anyway. Or how about in Wisconsin, which somehow had a miraculous 90% voter turnout. 7 voting wards in the city of Milwaukee reported more votes than they had registered voters. And guess who won most of them? Or in Pennsylvania, where just last night another batch of more than 23,000 votes was delivered in Philly, 100% of which just happened to be for Joe Biden. Now what do you think the odds of that are? Or in Arizona, where the Public Legal Interest Foundation is now suing over some voters' ballots allegedly being canceled because they were filled out with a Sharpie. Twitter is censoring that story, even though the claim is being investigated by the state Republican Attorney General's office. James O'Keefe claims to have first-hand testimony from a USPS driver who said his supervisor told all mail carriers to separate out any ballots they found in outgoing mail on November 4th. So they could be hand-stamped for the day before and counted as legitimate ballots. And the media, who've spent the last 4+ years screaming about Russiagate, and P-tapes in Ukraine, and racist pro-life teenagers and Kavanaugh running a secret rape ring in high school, and who circulated photos of border facilities from 2014 and blamed Trump for it, and labeled all Republicans Nazis, is now baffled that conservatives are questioning these secretive and never-ending ballot counts. Really? Like, yeah, that Hunter Biden bombshell really isn't worth reporting, but oh, hey, look! Another 300,000 totally legitimate votes were found behind this playground teeter-totter in Milwaukee, and 100% are for Biden. I'll be darned. This is the media that stood in front of a horde of rioters, torching cars and looting stores, and labeled them mostly peaceful, but are now showing crowds of concerned Trump supporters calmly milling about outside a counting center, and suddenly that's a mob. We've been screaming for weeks that a hastily cobbled together mail-in process for a national election made up of a hodgepodge of state rules and deadlines would be a recipe for disaster. Not just for fraud and abuse, but for rampant human error, and frankly, that's giving a gigantic benefit of the doubt. Overnight on November 3rd, a gigantic dump of over 138,000 votes was reported in Michigan, every single one of which had supposedly gone to Biden. Those numbers were quickly added to Biden's vote tally, and any question over their legitimacy was immediately squashed on Twitter until it turned out the whole thing was a typo. State officials later came out and claimed that an extra 0 had accidentally been added to the votes for Biden out of Shiawassee County. Meanwhile, over in Antrim County, where Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 30 points in 2016, this year's count showed Biden leading Trump by 29, which seems a bit off, don't you think? But see, we're supposed to just roll over and take all this at face value without asking any questions or pointing out any blatant statistical impossibilities, because the people who've questioned the legitimacy of the 2016 election for the last 4 years straight and who used the Steele dossier like it was the Bible are now telling us that this is totally on the up and up. And that's the plan. That's always been the plan. That's That's the whole point of the mail-in ballot system, because a lot of things can be gotten away with under the cover of chaos, and there was no way they were ever going to risk a repeat of last time. We knew this. The only thing that was ever going to be determined on Election Day was how many votes Joe Biden still had to get to win. And the media, who've long abandoned any pretenses of reporting the truth, who spent the last 4 years openly lying to our faces, do not get to tell us what we have to believe or what we have to accept. And that's your reality check, America. Make sure you like us on Facebook and Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube, and stay sane out there.